Well, hi. Hello, everybody. It's Reanimated. This is, I don't know what number episode. We're in the 400s. It's our 11-year podcast anniversary is coming up. Actually,
Woo.
I think tomorrow.
Oh my gosh.
Weird. And we've been making a lot of podcasts, but for this podcast, we're going to be talking about an independent film that came out in 2023, but maybe was released on VOD in 2024. I'm not sure, called Blackout.
Yep.
Which is getting some recognition out there. My name is Stuart, and joining me is the inimitable H.A. Conrad in New York. How are you?
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
We have one little tidbit of news. It's not even really much news. It was just a little riff, but it's kind of funny, and I do think we should talk about it.
Yeah. So, I forget why I was watching Conan O'Brien YouTube clips lately. I think it's because he was on Hot Ones, and I don't know if you've ever seen that interview show, but it's kind of insane. These are extremely hot sauces, and this is the interview show you watch to see like Idris Elba start crying and Scarlett Johansson like become a mucousy faced mess.
Mm.
These sorts of like I'm not sure why people's agents are like, yes, this is a good thing for you to go and do. I mean, it's very real. The questions are very well researched. It's usually actually a very good interview, but it's also they're trying to eat hot chicken wings and it doesn't go well. And Conan, and this happened with Alton Brown too. Alton Brown was completely unfazed by all the hot sauces when he did his interview, and
Mm.
Conan tried to be just as unfazed, I think, as an Alton Brown type.
Hmm.
Have you ever seen this show, AJ?
I've seen clips of it.
Yeah. Well, it's worth finding them on YouTube sometimes. If you have like, 20 minutes, I feel like they're fairly short. And so he's Conan style being kind of like comedically irate about how much he's not tasting any of the hot sauce. And then he ends up drinking out of the hot sauce bottles. And for whatever reason, that put him in my YouTube algorithm. And so there were a lot of clips of people checking in on him to make sure he was okay.
Hmm.
Because he got messed up. I think his face was numb by the end of the interview.
Well, then, of course, as all things turn to zombies in every instance, this was like a little clip between him and Jordan Peele and some other people, but talking about fast zombies versus slow zombies and which is scarier. And Conan is of the mind that slow zombies are scarier, and Jordan Peele was like, "No, dude, they're not. They'll get to you faster." But I guess like part of it for me, yeah, I think they're both equally honestly scary, although fast zombies more terrifying in my mind. But the slow zombies, you have enough time to realize, oh, that something's wrong, and it's like a slow roll of horror, right?
There's at least a chance of survival in a slow zombie
Yeah,
apocalypse. Yeah.
fast zombie, probably not, and
No, because
maybe
they have the same advantages, which are they never stop, they never sleep, as
right.
slow zombies. So you're done in a fast. I feel, yeah, like that 2004 Zack Snyder Dawn of the Dead. Nobody's getting out of that, and that's kind of how that movie goes. There's no helicopter on the top of the mall waiting to take them all to an island. We're here to talk about Blackout, which is a Larry Fessenden film. Larry Fessenden is a well-known name in horror circles, especially, I guess, indie movies,
Mm.
as a writer, director, producer, and a character actor in a lot of stuff. He was just in Killers of the Flower Moon, um, but he's not in this film as an actor. He's behind the camera,
Yep.
and so he's the guy who kind of seem to put this thing together. And then there's an interesting cast, which I think we could start with if you're cool with that, HA.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's got a cast, some of whom um
Yeah, it's
I
some
think,
familiar faces, right?
yeah. I mean, I would say, do you want to like the main character is named Charlie, and he is
Yeah,
the Alex Hurt, correct?
he's played by Alex Hurt, who is William Hurt's son, who I've never that I know of seen in anything, but does a pretty good job in this role.
Yeah. And it's really kind of funny. Because I it didn't occur to me that who it was until because I watched it cold and then the family photos come up and I was like, is that William Hurt?
Yeah,
And it's like they actually use Alex Hurt's family photos in this.
crazy, right?
Yeah.
And
Uh,
William Hurt had just died.
yeah, and Alex Hurt does have some like some of the way that some of his intonations and like little speech affects, and then there's a moment or two where you're like, oh yeah, I could totally I see it now, so I guess I didn't make the connection.
I was kind of waiting for William Hurt to show up in this film before I realized, no, no, he's actually been dead
Yeah,
for 2 years.
he's been dead for a while. But in any case, we have him, and then
And there's like three or four other pretty recognizable
yeah,
faces. And I'll start with the most recognizable for me because he was in a movie that we reviewed not long ago, and that's Jeremy Holm, who plays this guy called Harry. Harry is just a drunk in this film. He's like a kind of an incidental character. He has maybe three or four. He has two scenes and several lines. He was Big John Gruber in Herd. You remember that guy?
yep.
Yeah, the organizer of the militia.
Hmm.
And Jeremy Holm is a recognizable actor not only for those two roles, but also was in things like House of Cards and other things. A lot of TV.
Yeah, I mean, the one that was most recognizable to me was actually Michael Hammond, the guy
Well,
who,
yeah, he's been in a million
yeah,
projects.
and oh, often
So
plays like kind of like a hard-nosed, or like really antagonistic character.
yeah,
Uh,
and maybe for me, best known Marshall. This is Marshall Bell who plays Hammond.
oh,
Uh,
sorry, yeah,
he played Quato or whatever in Total
yeah,
Recall.
yes, and he's just been, I mean, he's been in so many different things like Starship Troopers, and like the minute he sort of made his entrance, I'm like, oh, that guy, I cannot believe it. So that was kind of fun. Anybody else that stood out to you?
Yeah. Well, is this Steve Buscemi's brother,
Yes,
Michael
it is. Yep,
Buscemi?
he's
I
in a
don't
lot.
remember the character Andy though. I
Isn't
watched this
he
movie a few days
isn't
ago.
he the dude that gets taken out in the street? Is that him? He's kind of, but maybe not.
Harry is the guy being played by Jeremy Holm gets taken out. Maybe not in the street. But yeah, maybe that is who that is.
The
That's a
guy,
very small part then, if that
yeah, the
is.
guy who's with him is like,
Is that his name, Andy
I think so.
or Steve?
It was a pretty quick
It,
appearance. So,
yeah. And then Kevin Corrigan is another recognizable face. He is playing Bob Kraus. Um, Yeah, sorry. I was getting them mixed up in my head. Jeremy Holmes' Harry is only in one scene and then he is killed quite quickly, but he does have some lines. Kevin Corrigan is the drunk antagonist, Bob Kraus. And Kevin Corrigan is another one of these very recognizable faces. He's in a scene at the nursery and then again at the bar, talking
yep,
talking out of his butt.
yep,
He's been in a million things. Usually playing somebody of low moral standing, I would say.
yep. Um,
Recognizable face, though. But yeah, so I think that's kind of who I was really thinking of people that I've seen before. But then honorable mentions, uh, Joe Swanberg has one scene. He's that 6'3" new boyfriend, plays
yes.
character named Stuart. No character in any film or television production named Stuart has ever been a good character.
It's a bad omen if that name pops up in a podcast too, I hear.
Well, I mean, I'm 11 years going strong, so but yeah. Oh, and then the guy who plays the chief
Slow
of police
burn.
is also kind of
Yeah,
recognizable.
it's a slow burn, Stuart. It's a slow burn. 11 years.
11 years.
Yeah.
Joseph Castillo Midyet playing Luis, the chief of police for this town of is it Talbot Falls?
Yep.
I recognizable, but then when I looked at his filmography, I was like, I'm not seeing anything here that would make sense for why I know who your face, but I've definitely seen him and stuff. So
Yep.
he's been around. So it's an interesting cast. it's got a sprinkling of recognizable faces, and it's all tied together by one person. So there is kind of a well, there's nobody else to blame anyway. As you're watching it for like storyline decisions, and things like that, because it's the writer, director, producer at the top.
Yeah.
The first scene is you know,
Yeah. This
it's
is
a
like,
couple having some nude outdoor sexy times.
which seems kind of, it seems a little weird, I have to say, but all good. I guess they're in upstate New York or rural New York, so maybe. But it's very much like a classic horror film sort of setup. It's got like, you know, the dialogue in this, like if one, there's a lot of like interesting ideas about it. I would say that if there had been a slightly better script and faster pacing, that it would have been better. It felt like a lot of like dialogue to fill time. Does that make sense? Like it didn't, even with this scene when we're opening it up, they're like, you know, gonna have sex, and it's a pretty, I mean, it's a pretty like honestly a pretty like intense sex scene, and then they get interrupted by a creature or werewolf,
Death. Yeah.
death.
The,
Um,
from the perspective of the camera walking toward
right,
them, which
right.
is
So we don't see,
tried and true as far as a monster movie.
yep,
And this movie has a lot of those sorts of old horror uh, touches that you're like, yeah, this is I've seen this somewhere before, or this feels familiar.
right.
Because Larry Fessenden is a huge fan of. I mean, he's a
Yeah,
horror
he's
director,
recording.
but
Yeah, yeah.
he's a huge fan of old school horror.
And this is the classic like teenagers having sex. The moral sort of judgment of that is like, all right, maybe they're bigger, maybe they're older than teenagers. I don't know, but in any case, they are interrupted mid-sex, and um,
I
you
kind
know,
of thought she got away at first when I
seemed like
watched
he
this,
got away, but apparently
but
not.
there's a lot of flashbacks about her later.
Yeah.
At least a couple where he's trying to he's because at the center of it, this movie is about this guy Charlie who is blacking out a lot, and it's funny like when you read the what's it called the like slogan or the one line summary synopsis for this film, it's like likable alcoholic artist convinced he's a werewolf.
Yeah.
And I guess yeah, I mean that's it, those are all true things. Actually, it's like a fine arts painter is convinced he's a werewolf wreaking havoc on small American town under the full moon. But there's another, I've seen another synopsis, maybe it was in a review that was like a likable alcoholic fine arts painter. Like the fact that he might be an alcoholic, I know it's in the story. It's definitely the intent of what they were trying to get at. But other than him drinking in several scenes, I guess I didn't really get the sense that he was an alcoholic. I don't know.
Well, and
That was
I
just me.
had the same thing, and I thought that maybe some of what he was doing was to cope with all the weird visions of death he was having. So that wasn't totally clear that this was something that was in place before he werewolfed. I think there's one comment by Sharon, who's his ex, that says, "Oh, he has a lot of problems." And maybe that's sort of like it isn't clear that that's what it is. So
I
I
think she has no idea what his issue is,
right,
right?
right.
Uh, yeah, so after the scene of the two people getting killed, we wake up with Charlie in his motel room, which is full. And this is an interesting scene, honestly, because it's like he's not awake yet, but we're in his room looking at his stuff from the
Yep.
perspective of the camera, and we're looking at his paintings, and the progression that with which we look at the different paintings tells a story too. It starts off with a lot of natural landscapes, leaves, um, brooks, and things like that. Then we get into self-portraits. And then as the film goes on, we get to see some of his other work, which is way more disturbing.
Yeah. And they set up the scene well, and that's one thing, there's there's a lot of sort of gaps in character building where they do build it in this scene. It's like slow camera pans to try to like let the audience build their own story, I guess, in their head. And there's a lot of that going on in this, like this scene, and like you're supposed to. I guess it's good that they're not hitting the audience over the head with everything, but sometimes they do it too much, so it's sort of like an uneven way of storytelling and movie making. But this, you very much get the sense, he's all passed out in the bed. Um, you kind of get the sense that he may have been the one to do this, though they wait till we get there, like they wait to fill that piece in. But essentially he's got a very, I don't want to say like a pathetic air about him, but he kind of does. Like he's definitely down on his luck. He's living in this little like motel and is about ready to decamp. And
Yeah.
he doesn't, I mean, he's got everything in his car. You get there's just a lot going on with him, and he's very ungrounded in terms of things that are going on. And they then start to sort of build the story around maybe how his life fell apart. And I do think one of the things that sort of like interesting is that there's a few different things going on. One is about, his father died and there's these nefarious things going on. And they do this with like, there's different, you can see the different campaign signs like vote against Prop 7 or vote for Prop 7. And so they try to like clue the audience into the things that are happening in this town before you actually get the story.
Yeah. As he
Um,
starts his a lot of this movie is, well, it starts off with him driving all over the place in this town. And
right.
so one of those things he sees is these hilltop, yes, hilltop, no, jobs, yes, and it turns out that he's actually he used to work on this hilltop project because one of the people he goes to see, first of all, he has like an interaction with one of the handful of non-actors in this film. I don't know if that's a fair thing to say, but he talks to Martha, the motel owner. This woman's not an actor, right? Is that just me? Am I being a jerk by saying that? She delivers her lines. Seems like a charismatic person in real life, but does not seem like an actor. And then
No,
there's
she
one or two other people
does
who are,
not. Oh,
yeah, there's one or two other people who deliver their lines in the same way. There's a guy at the nursery later. I forget his name. It was like Jorge or something. He's like, "Boss, somebody is here." Like, turn on his heel and walk away from the camera. There was just a couple of those kinds of things. Otherwise, you've got a lot of people doing their best in this film.
yep.
And so yeah, Charlie, we are getting that like ambient storytelling through these kind of signs about voting for this project. Charlie calls Earl from his car, talks to his voicemail, says, "I'm coming over. Uh, just wait for me," or something along those lines. I forget
Yeah.
exactly what the
He's
message
like, I'll
was.
be there in 20 minutes. And then he was not there in
And
20 minutes.
he spends the rest of the movie not getting to Earl's house, basically. Well, he does, but not till like the second act.
I'd say
Uh,
that Earl should be kind of happy that he wasn't getting to his house. Poor Earl. Um,
well, yeah. Uh, but Earl went
and,
into this eyes wide open, I feel like. So,
mm,
okay. So he's called, then I guess he goes to his old job, is one of the first places he stops off to talk to this guy named Hammond, who was played by Marshall Bell. Oh, he's upset because Martha, the motel owner, told Charlie as he was packing up his car that the police or Hammond had ID'd a suspect in the killing of these two people a month ago.
right. And then
Um,
Miguel,
and
who's one of the workers, and it's
and it's a guy that he used to work with, that Charlie used to work with, it turns out. And so he goes to Hammond to say, "Hey, that's he was the witness, not the suspect. Please, retract or recant or something along those lines." And Marshall Bell, rather Hammond, is an irascible guy and says things like, "I will not do that. I'm just happy that you're no longer dating my daughter." Things along those lines.
right. But then they also they throw in a little slice of the fact that um part of Charlie's issue with Hammond is that the environmental study was faulty and he wants him to redo it, and Hammond's just like, yeah, that was not true, and it's not gonna really, he's like, maybe even if it is, it's not gonna affect people for, while I'm alive.
Yeah.
And then it's, so you see there's like a few different tensions here, and then it sort of ends with the comment like, "Oh, I guess you don't think Sharon's gonna have children with his daughter," and he goes, "Well, at least it's not with you." Like, so lots of feelings in this particular conversation. Um,
Yeah.
and Charlie then goes off to see this lawyer, right, Kate?
Yeah. He
It's
goes to see Kate. Do you have
and
feelings about this scene?
it's weird. She's from Reanimator, apparently. I don't so
Oh,
um, but it's very weird. It again, it feels, and I like this is the I I like the idea of this film. It felt like maybe they didn't have enough rehearsals, maybe it was the script, but everything feels very stilted and a little bit artificial.
I think that's actually a calling card of Larry Fessenden's dialogue.
Mm.
And I've heard him in an interview talk about that he likes things to be written in a way that serves his agenda more than maybe believable dialogue. And I think he does that on purpose,
Yeah.
for better or for worse.
In any case, this scene is very odd. Like his
So, wait,
original.
sorry, we have to come back to Kate being from Reanimator. She's the Scream Queen from
Oh,
Reanimator.
okay, there you go. She
She
looks
plays
pretty
Megan Halsey,
cool. Mm.
who is top billed in that
Yeah.
film. She's the one who, yeah, all those terrible things happened to her.
All those things happen to her. Well, in this only a kiss happens to her, so she's all right, but it's a weird kiss and the whole thing's
It's
weird.
a whole Mrs. Robinson sort of vibe going
Yeah.
on with that scene.
Yeah, I don't know. But basically he came over there because I guess he was supposed to paint her shed and then
But that's
haha.
not why he's going over. Well, he's not painting any more sheds.
No,
He's
no, of course
basically
he's not. But that's like they kind of draw that, why he knows her
he
at all.
goes over there, I think, because he's been picking up vibes from her that she's interested in his other offerings.
Activity. And
Um,
apparently also in other offerings that he did not know. But in
but then
any
he's
case,
just like, hey, you're a lawyer. Could you just look through this box of files, or maybe it's just a folder,
yeah,
to find anything that's fishy? And it's like a lot, it's a thick folder, is my recollection. And there's no way. And why would she do it?
right.
Because she wants to she likes him for some reason.
Yeah.
She wants him to paint her shed, and that's a euphemism. Uh, so he dumps this giant binder of documents on her desk or whatever, and then is like, "All right, I gotta go." She tries to make out with him. He's like, "Nah." And then he goes to see his ex. Like it's just so that this is part of the construction of this film that does feel a little bit like we're like we're treading water. He's called Earl. He's like, I'm on my way. And then he does say in the conversation or the message he leaves is like, I got to make some stops or I got some stuff to do. But it's like a lot of stops. And these are, you get the sense that these are not places that are close together necessarily because he's kind of out in the country.
Right.
Yeah. So he's driving now to the nursery business that is owned by his ex fiance, Sharon. This is where we meet Bob Kraus, who was yelling at a Mexican gentleman whose name I've forgotten, but he was the guy who delivers a very wooden line a little bit later. This is part of this subplot in the film of Hammond brought labor from an immigrant workforce to help build Hilltop and then laid them all off. I forget why he did that. There was some reason. Um, and the now there are just like other people in the community, including Bob Kraus, who are just being jerks to these like anybody who's not a white English speaking person, basically. And so there is this whole undertone of this film, including Charlie, who's a bit of a white savior, going around and talking to uh, the guy who plays Miguel later on in the film. But I would say it's like one of the less successful subplots of the film, because mostly because of the way it gets resolved at the end. And we can get
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, and we'll get there. But um, I guess while I was watching this film, I thought it would have been a little bit more interesting um if, you know, it was more ambiguous about whether Charlie was actually turning into a werewolf. Because if you think about it in a way, like if this person is having these things, they may be delusions, whatever, and that's what everybody else would say, but the audience doesn't actually see that, that would be a little bit more interesting, or not seeing him specifically transform. Um, and so all these like little subplot plots, I mean, I guess part of it is like, oh, there's all these like weird distractions that have absolutely nothing to do with what's going on. And
Yeah,
but
he's extremely distracted for what's going on in his life.
yeah.
Like he
Um,
does he have time to really be doing all of this like Hammond crusade stuff? No.
well, I mean, I guess we figure out why he's doing it eventually, which is that he is trying to, I guess, make things right before he offs himself or has somebody off him.
Yeah, but he doesn't have time for any of that.
Right. But it
You
just
know,
feels like kind of weird that he's even spending the time doing that.
I think
But
it's also because it's something that Charlie is passionate about,
right.
even if he is coming at it all sideways and weird. Um, and by the end, he does make an impact on this issue that he is passionate about. It's just extra legal and although maybe Kate comes through with some. I mean, her name does come up later, and
Right.
she is talking. Like, I don't know if there's a subpoena or something, but there's something going on the legal side of the
Right.
story later on. But it might all be moot by the end of the film because of what happens.
Right.
Um, so he goes to Sharon. They have like one of those. It's honestly a pretty good scene. She does a good job of being like hurt, confused. She's like, "How many times do we have to say goodbye?" He's just trying to give her a painting of the building that they're standing in.
Right.
That was kind of funny. He
Yeah.
just leaves it there. She doesn't want to see it, but he like unwraps it and puts it on a
On the
door. Is it on a door or on
Yeah,
this?
on the door.
It's
It's
gonna
weird.
just fall off, but okay. Uh, she never sees that, but it felt kind of meta because then he drives away and you're like
And
from
you see the
the
thing. I
camera's
know.
in the exact perspective of the painting.
Right. And then, you know, he's going off to see.
Calls Earl again, leaves another message. But
Yep.
now he's like, oh, you know what though? I'm gonna fill this car up. I was kind of under the impression that this was Earl's car, that he was borrowing Earl's
Me
car.
too, because isn't that what it sounded like? It was
Doesn't
weird.
I think he might have even said like, I'm gonna bring you your car, but it's
Yep.
actually his car. He's just giving it to Earl as one of his bye-bye gifts.
Right.
I was also under the impression that maybe he'd already killed Earl because Earl never answers his phone, and that
Yeah.
was one of the subjects
I
of his
also thought
blackouts.
that. I also thought that and thought he was going to show up and maybe not have remembered that he had killed his
It's
friend or
like,
something.
oh, that's right, I did kill a guy in this
Yeah.
cabin.
Yeah.
But yeah, so he's pumping gas, looking at the full moon, but the sky is still light, and then gets behind the wheel of the car and swigs out of a bottle. And there is a real deer in this scene. I don't know if you
Two real deers.
was there two real deers?
Yeah.
Like I don't know that they had animal control out there helping them, or if this was just they're filming in upstate New York or wherever, and there were just deer all over the set. Because it feels like it's because the deer is like 50 feet in the background, just in the street wandering around. I thought that was kind of
Yeah,
interesting.
I would imagine they were just wandering around. I don't think there was anybody throwing them around. That
It was nice.
probably they just lucked out with that shot. Is
Lucked
my
out with that deer. Uh, and then it gets dark very fast, and this happens in all kinds of things where if it gets dark, things go badly because I mean I'm looking at you, Last Voyage of the Demeter,
hmm
where days were 5 seconds long, and in this case though, the transition from day to night seems to go very very quickly. This is a scene that is fairly iconic. It's unique. Larry Fessenden has been like, this was one of those images that I wanted to get into the film, or like a sequence of a guy turning into a werewolf while he's driving a car,
Yeah,
which is comedic. But
I
it's
guess,
obviously
I guess,
it's not played for comedy in this scene.
yeah, but it is kind of funny. I mean, but my only my when it started to happen, I was like, wouldn't you just pull over? Like, why are you still trying to drive? You're a werewolf.
I don't know. Maybe if your body is in enough pain, you can't find that break. So he kind of drives off of an embankment. And despite being on a country road, there's a lot of traffic and people are stopping and checking in on him. Did you have any impressions from this scene? Like, what was your feeling about how this all goes?
Which part of it, the
Like
transformation
he,
scene?
though, well, yeah, sure. The from the transformation to how it all kind of ends.
I, you know, like this felt like a classic horror film in terms of the werewolf movie and the transformation scene. It's a little bit campy, but I think that's okay for something like this. Um, Transforming in a car, I definitely felt like the director, like they were just like, let's do this. Let's just have him transform in the car. And it is kind of an interesting idea. So you have him transfer, crashes, and then these people are trying to help him and then get totally like taken down. It is kind of a good jump scare, I suppose, as they're like wandering up. Though, like, okay, you think somebody's hurt, but if you're hearing noises like that coming from a car, would you really go closer? Probably not.
Yeah, I don't know that Harry, the guy who walks up to the car, and I don't remember if there were a lot of weird noises coming from it. I didn't think there were because I was
They
like,
had a
why is
few
he?
they had a
What?
few growls and it was weird. Like, because if you're gonna go and like, and maybe that's why he was being, because this was like my note too. It's like
He's like
if
tiptoeing up to this
if you think
vehicle.
somebody's hurt,
You're
like,
gonna run up to the car.
are you scared or like I guess maybe you don't want to see somebody dead. I don't know. It was weird.
Yeah, it
Um,
was weird. And his friend is that maybe Andy is up
yep.
in the street trying to get a signal to call 911. But then it's a good reveal. Jeremy Holmes stands up, Harry stands up, and at first you can't see that his throat has been slashed, but then within a second there's all the blood and he collapses. I was watching this with my spouse, by the way. Uh,
Oh no, poor Holly.
no, she enjoyed it. Honestly, she's come back like since and been like, I was thinking more about that film and uh there's a scene later, the prison cell scene where she goes, "Oh, right, this is a horror movie."
Yeah.
But this stuff, like, yeah, this isn't her cup of tea, but she wasn't completely. This is fairly tame as far as horror movies go. There's not a ton of jump scares. This part where Harry stands up and then you can tell that his throat's been slashed is well done, honestly. And then you don't really know how the rest of that scene unfolds until you're looking at it from the perspective of the police the next day in daylight. Actually, that's not true because yeah, was it Andy gets hit by another car that's going
Oh, yeah.
by, and then he's screaming as the werewolf approaches from the camera's perspective. So you have a
Yeah,
feeling that Andy's not going to make it,
right. But then we don't even see like anybody from the other car.
you
Is
do see
that,
blood on the door of that car the next day, which makes
yep.
you think, yeah, Charlie had his way with them too.
Maybe they didn't have extras to throw in there, I suppose.
So Charlie as a werewolf is kind of just a murder machine, and I think that that's an interesting approach to werewolf canon. I think is that how werewolves always are? They're just like, oh, anything moving, I will kill it. Because does that strike you as how wolves are?
Um, I don't know, like any kind of werewolf, there's always like if you look at like American Werewolf in London, or even Wolf with, that was like later, obviously, and the original kind of Wolfman and stuff. I mean, most of it is that they don't most of it's that they don't understand what they're doing or that they're just kind of like wildly going after whatever would be sort of like a prey.
Yeah. And
So that's
Larry
actually
Fessenden has described this as it's just a wild animal.
right.
And I guess you could say like after transforming, Wolf Charlie is like confused and scared, and
Right.
therefore maybe he would just lash out and try to kill anything that gets close to him because he's worried in that kind of protect yourself way
Right.
that also includes hunting down people.
Yes.
But it's just weird. It's not like does Charlie Werewolf wake up and be like, I haven't eaten any humans in a while. I'm starving. But Charlie the human is like probably eating normal meals during the day, and so he shouldn't be that hungry when he turns into a wolf too. So
I think it's not hunger. I think it's more just you know, stalking or maybe feeling threatened and just going after them. I mean, that tends to be like the wolf canon is that they just um kind of go after people. Like not there's no like conscientious. effort there. It's just like gonna
Yeah,
gonna go on a rampage.
it does feel a little rampagey because certainly killing the driver of the second car doesn't feel necessarily like something you need to do, but it does appear that he does that. We have the scene with Bob coming out of the bar. There's some rednecks talking about how they'll never leave each other. Um, and Bob and another guy from town are having a conversation. Um, and it is Bob's very drunk. There's some scenes of Charlie running through the woods too. And what did you think of his? Well, let's talk about the makeup of the monster. You basically get to see it a little bit in some of these scenes where he's running through meadows. How'd you
Yeah,
like it?
it's like Wolfman. I mean, that's
It
kind of
it,
what
it
I
is Wolfman. Yeah,
yeah.
probably a fairly straightforward prosthetic mask for the head and makeup, and glove, furry gloves, and then they were talking about Alex Hurt's background as a dancer and how he worked on the movements of the Wolfman, and this is all like straight out of Larry Fessenden's head too. So
Mm.
uh yeah, it's not the hulking quadruped werewolf that you sometimes see in things in more CGI or effects heavy things. This is a guy in a mask who's running with his hands out, um, and pausing to look around every so often. It's I mean, I'm not saying that to be dismissive. It's still it's its own thing. I just don't like. I guess I'm coming at this a little bit like werewolves. What are they like? Because I'm not really sure how I expect werewolves to act, I guess, is kind of my thing.
Yeah.
And this one acts kind of like a guy in a way.
Yeah.
He's just a guy.
Well,
But
and
so he's out there
he doesn't
staring at
fully
people.
and he doesn't fully wolf out and like his clothes don't like Wolverine off or anything like that. You know,
No.
still always wearing even if they um even if they're a little rough and worse for wear, it's not like he's busting out into this giant wolf shape. So
Yes.
he's not, he's not turning into like an actual wolf, which is the one of the whole things about like the werewolf transformations when they, this is wolf man versus like actual big wolf that like the change is into like that shape and losing the man shape into a wolf shape is part of the pain of the process, I guess. So American Werewolf in London, I still think is one of the most painful werewolf
Yeah.
transformation films.
Looking anyway, and
Yeah,
and all the screaming, obviously.
yeah.
Um,
But in this case, he's just kind of he's running
this
around, and you do get the sense because it's like you'll see him pause or whatever, and you're not quite sure whether he's thinking or if there is a motivation there. I mean, there's moments where it's like he is doesn't seem like just a wild animal too. So
Well, yeah, and then he's there's a scene here with him stalking these two guys outside this bar. Then you cut to him running through the woods, and then waking up the next day, looking up overhead. There's leaves overhead, and then it transitions of that shot into a painting of that, which I thought was pretty cool. And then he wakes up looking kind of perturbed.
yeah,
And then we have the cops working over the scene. The female cop is picking up evidence without gloves on, like cell phones. Uh, the male cop, Luis, is just throwing his coffee into the crime scene. He throws his coffee a couple times in this film. It's like he asks for coffee, then he's always throwing it away before he gets into a car. It's just a weird thing that I don't know why he kept doing it. And we get to see a lot of the paintings that have spilled out of the trunk of Charlie's white Volvo, and we know this has to get tied back to him. Like at this point, kind of the cat's out of the bag. You're no longer a secret werewolf. All of your very personal looking art is there, and these are paintings now we're seeing not of like pastoral nature scenes, but of a man ripping the flesh of a beast or something like red meat out of a mouth sort of scenes. It's pretty disturbing stuff, and it's not what we were shown earlier. So it's kind of a cool way to show that oh, his art's been getting dark.
yeah. Like there's a huge transition from, you know, some of the things that he had been creating to this time in his life because he's being haunted. He's being haunted by all of this. And I don't know, the way that he's experiencing these moments probably feels like a dream or delusion too. And so coming having it come out in the art is kind of interesting. So I liked how they showed.
Yeah, especially when you see in one of the next scenes how he's doing some of this art. He closes his eyes
Yep.
and like works on these pieces. So to do this, he walks from where he wakes up to his old work site where he still has a key to get in, and he still has a locker full of stuff. So he charges his phone, changes clothes into his white painter pants now and a new shirt, and does some art,
Yep.
and then heads back out. Um, this time he goes over to Miguel's house. Miguel is the guy who's been unfairly fingered, let's say, as a suspect in the murder of the naked couple, I guess, from the beginning of the film by Hammond, even though he was the one who saw something, and we get to see what he saw in one of his flashbacks later, which is kind of crazy.
Yep.
Um, And this is a weird scene where Charlie is like, "Hey man, are you doing okay? Like it's not cool that Hammond's put this on you and there's crazy rednecks watching your house." And Miguel is like, "Yeah, you're cool, man, but I'm fine. Uh I'll be okay." And Charlie's like, "Cool. All right. Give me a ride and give me two beers." It's just a weird. I'm not really sure why Miguel. I think they're trying to play into the fact that Charlie was pretty cool before, and now he just seems not like. What does he bring to the table?
Yeah.
Doesn't seem like he has much to offer Miguel. But he's just there maybe to lend support, lend his moral support, and ask for a ride into town. Um, then there's a succession of rides because he gets out of Miguel's car. Because while he's in Miguel's car, he texts Kate and he's like, "Hey, have you looked over all those documents yet?" I don't know how much time has passed. I don't know what he's thinking. He doesn't text her. He's on the phone with her, and you don't get to hear her side of the conversation. But it's like, of course, she hasn't figured out the legal ramifications of this like folder of documents that you gave her yesterday. But once he hears that she's not ready to do anything with that, he's like, you know what? I'm just gonna get out right here. No big deal." And then he's gonna just walk down the street, and then he gets picked up by Father, what's his name? The priest.
The father, whatever his name is. But
They call him Padre a lot. And this guy is really concerned
yeah.
about young Charlie.
Well,
Uh,
everybody's making comments about how Charlie looks. Like everybody is. So,
but he does he look that bad? I mean,
oh,
Alex Hurt is very fit, zero body fat. Guy
he's
doesn't look unhealthy.
there's a lot of him like, we see his abs a lot.
He
A
takes off his shirt a
lot, a fair amount.
surprising amount of times.
Um, but everybody's talking about like, Miguel mentions it and now the pastor mentions it. It's like you look like basically they're like, you look like hell.
Yeah.
And he's just like, thanks for noticing. But they're in the car and there's it's interesting what some people think the issue is, and maybe some of it is this. Maybe, and even sometimes Charlie kind of mentions this that, oh, my dad died and I discovered all these dark things, and I'm trying, I'm struggling. Maybe I let darkness in, and there's all this like, there's a weird little thing here, whereas it's like what actually happened, to him to cause him to turn into a werewolf. And is that a real thing? Is it, something he did himself? We eventually find out the answer to that. But in this moment, he's talking to the pastor, and the pastor's thinking this is about like daddy issues. And a few people mentioned that throughout the film that he's struggling with his daddy issues. And the pastor's just like, oh, your dad did support your painting career, and Charlie's kind of like, I have bigger fish to fry, man. Like he
But it's
tries.
not it's not nothing. Like there is something to this daddy issues argument because he is trying to figure out what his father's legacy is and
Right.
what it means for his life. But he does have much bigger fish to fry. And he's basically You know, at its heart, this movie is about a guy trying to kill himself and not quite succeeding a bunch of times.
Right.
And so of course, if that's the thing like that's foremost in your mind, none of this really makes sense. None of this really matters. But then the counter argument to that is like, so why are you going over to Hammond's house to be like, hey, be nice to Miguel? Like what where's your head, man? Are you trying to kill yourself, or do you really feel like you have to put your house in order when none of this stuff is in your house? You don't have a house. You live out of a motel in your car. So I get like stopping by Sharon's to be like, I'm sorry that I was a bad
Right.
fiance. But everything else, a lot of the other stuff here, the stuff that involves like a business venture, feels very much like it wouldn't matter.
Agree.
Yeah.
Especially if he's really struggling with all this stuff and seeing all these incredibly traumatic and violent images, so much that he's like drawing them.
Yeah.
I just don't think he would be wasting his time doing some of this stuff.
So,
And there's also the piece where it's like, hey, his solution is that he's gonna have to have his friend make silver bullets. Like how long does it take to make silver bullets? It's not like you could do it instantaneously, you know?
well, Earl, I don't know how long he's been working on it, but he's got the bullets. Like Earl is
Right.
ready to go, and that's where he gets dropped off by the Padres, Earl's house. And Earl seems like a good character. He's a nice guy. The actor who's playing him does a good job of portraying him. The guy's name is it Motel? It might be Motel Jin Foster.
It was good. I just thought there should have been more of him, or that should have been a little bit more fleshed out. I would have liked to have seen more of him in the film. Uh,
They make a huge, very obvious mistake in well, a few of them, I guess. But
yeah.
they have this plan, and their plan is he's made silver bullets. Earl mentions that yes, these silver bullets will fit into any of my many guns.
Right.
He has that line, and you're just like, oh, why would you need to say how many guns you have or that you have
We
more
also
than one
talk about
gun?
how many guns everybody in this town has. Everybody seems to have guns.
Sure.
It's a gun-toting town.
I
I'd be
mean,
nervous living in this town in the Hudson Valley in New York.
country folk.
Mm.
Uh, but
Handguns, though. Most people don't have handguns. This is a little weird.
so their whole plan though is well, they get around to it in a weird way because first I think they drink too much. But and that might lead to some of the mistakes they make later. But it's like I'm gonna tie you to a chair and wait a little late to do that too. I would have tied him up as soon as he got there. I'm gonna use the silver bullet that I've made and put it into one of my many guns. I'm gonna be recording this and I'm gonna put my iPhone on a tripod and then put that tripod 3 inches away from your feet. Even though you're tied into a chair, there's no way that that tripod is not going to get kicked over. And it is the first thing that happens when he starts to change. And so they were hoping to have this on-camera transformation, get having Earl, a black man, shoot Charlie. And Earl even brings it up. He's like,
Yeah,
"Don't
I
you
was
know
just
what's going to happen when
I think
I shoot you?"
I think Earl should firmly say no.
Yeah.
And there's got to be other solutions. And also their whole plan with the rope and everything like that. It's like, you know, you've seen the violence. You've seen what if this is indeed the case, like if he is turning into this, what this creature is capable of. I don't know that a wooden chair is gonna do it. It just felt like they should both know better. And so yeah, that was definitely a big plot hole there. And
Yeah.
I'm like, and the mics, everything's so close to the chair. What are you doing? Of course it's gonna get knocked over.
Yeah. And it does first things first. We've also had a scene of the cops, a couple scenes with the cops. There's another shot of Luis throwing a coffee away before they drive out to Earl's house because they know that Earl is friends with Charlie and they figured out that that's Charlie's car. And so they're driving out to Earl's house. And the female cop, whose name I've 100% forgotten, maybe it's Asta. I don't remember. Maybe it's Alice. No, I don't know. They are talking about like philosophical stuff. Like she is come across as the almost the brains behind the police station. She's talking about she's the one who makes the connection with Earl. She's talking about Umwelt, this German concept of how animals all live in like solipsistic little windows of their own consciousness only. And that's that's one of these arguments that the film is trying to put forward is we're too
Right.
siloed.
And then she has like heard or they have heard about the thing that the Miguel mentioned, which is the the
Hombre
wolf.
lobo.
Yeah, yeah, the solo one, and they're all talking through this until they get to Earl's house. And okay, can we talk about this scene and how it unravels? It's like,
Well, they get there when things have already gone bad.
yeah,
But Earl's still alive.
right, not for
Uh,
long though, because the
yeah, but
cops.
they can hear Earl yelling, "Charlie, just calm down." And the cops, instead of just running inside, and maybe that's not what you do, and maybe that's not what they should have done, but she is standing right in front of a large metal sculpture. She gets killed by accident, which I
She
guess
does,
so
but
does. Yeah.
we know that something's going to happen with this because they zoom in on the weird shear thing on the thing, and then
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The shears were too close to the foreground. Um, but so Luis, the head of the police chief, walks into the room. Earl is pointing a gun at a werewolf. Luis, though, is like, put down the gun. Earl shoots Luis, and Luis shoots and kills Earl. Earl's dead now because of, predictably, you know, you can't be black and have a gun in your hand in your own house.
yeah, and then as Charlie's escaping, Alice gets impaled herself on on the
She's
sculpture. She gets
she's
pushed
backpedaling so fast to get away from
from the wall,
Charlie the wolf that she impales and kills herself. And you
right?
kind of get the impression that Luis might be dead too. It wasn't clear where he was shot, but it turns out he was just winged.
Right. And then,
And Charlie's running off into the woods.
yep. And Charlie, has another stop to make at Sharon's house.
So
Um,
here's a question for you. Yes, share. This is a mostly improv scene, I guess, between these two actors, Joe Swanberg and the
so
woman
it's
playing
so
Alice.
incredibly painful.
It's slow. But it's like it shows a kinship and a kind of that they have a relationship. They're also like in their pajamas together in the kitchen. I guess it's late, maybe. She broke up, or he broke up. They broke up. Charlie and Sharon broke up a month ago. She's already like living with this guy,
Yeah.
and she broke up with her fiance a month
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah. It's not, and this feels weird, but also the scene between them, he just feels so creepy. I'm like, these
Joe
seem so
Swanberg,
annoying.
Stuart, the character
Yeah.
of Stuart, the sweetest, best guy ever,
I mean,
who's about to die.
it's the best name, but I don't know. The character doesn't do the name justice, Stuart. Oh, it's so
All
rough.
I could think of when I was watching the scene was that this guy is twice as tall as the
Oh,
woman.
he was so tall.
He's
So
6 foot
tall.
3 in real life, which actually means that she's just really
Tiny.
short.
Um,
Yeah.
but anyway, they're kind of cooking dinner and talking through. I mean, he just feels, I don't know, so creepy here. But
He's
anyway,
being so supportive. I thought he was actually, I didn't get creepy vibes from this guy at all.
ugh.
I got like, this is a nice guy. He's like making dinner. It felt good.
Oh,
But then
so
he's like, I'll be right back.
I more got that he's like, oh yeah, okay, I know you're sad about Charlie, but and he's just, I don't know. There's just something really creepy about him that I just didn't like. But anyway, there, I guess he's going out to get some weed from their car or something.
That's right.
And and that's when, also, okay, I will say this. I grew up in a place that was pretty rural. You
Yeah.
don't leave the doors open when you go outside. You just don't. Too many mosquitoes, too many other things. Also, wild animals. You don't leave the doors open like that. He goes out to the car, leaves the door wide open. It is a cool shot. It is a cool shot where it's like he's gone out to the car and she sees just this dark doorway and hears something. And as she's looking at it, Charlie as the Wolfman emerges, and that was a pretty cool reveal. I liked it, but
Emerges for
the
real.
door would have been closed. Like there's no way this thing would have been open. So that annoyed me a lot. But
Yeah.
now we see that Charlie may have something because, and maybe not, I don't know, he goes after her, but he doesn't kill her immediately like he has done everybody else.
We don't get to see usually because I think the effects would have been challenging. We don't usually get to see him killing people. We get to see it after he's done it.
Right, but it typically seems fast,
It does
right?
seem fast. It was certainly fast with Harry when he was in the car crash.
Right.
But instead of killing her, he kind of like disarms her and mounts her.
It's creepy. It's really creepy. It's like, oh, I hope I actually was so relieved when the police showed up because I
Yeah.
was like, I really hope that this is not going to be like a werewolf sexual assault scene.
Isn't there a werewolf sexual assault scene in the Dracula movie with
Yes.
Gary Oldman?
Yes, there is.
Yeah, I
There
remember
is.
that sort of. Is Yeah,
Um,
I think yeah.
yeah. And I was like, let's any no, 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 let's not do that. And thank goodness they didn't. I was so relieved. But
Yeah, because
he,
the cops show up and then he runs off into the darkness again.
yep,
He's been shot a couple of times, I think, but
to no
isn't that
avail.
to no avail exactly?
And then also like after this happens, we got we've got like Luis going off to see the hospital. I guess we have to gather. We don't find out till a minute later that Alice is dead. We see like a weird scene outside the hospital, and then he goes back to the jail where the town has been gathering into like the slowest, weird, strange mob scene I've ever seen.
I mean, it's a
Um,
mob is generous. It's 8 people,
yeah,
including
that's
Martha and
well, that's what they're trying to sort of create here, and it's all like get Miguel and like I guess this could happen, but he's just like, but I do like how Luis is just trying to be like, guys, no, there's a wolf man.
yeah,
Like
his
it's like
his
it's not Miguel.
his strategy to like calm down the populace is like, hey guys, stop trying to lynch Miguel. Instead, go home and lock your doors because there's a monster.
I know. It was, and they're all looking at him. I mean, the looks that they were giving him were pretty awesome. But
Yeah.
and then Hannick, the other guy that had been walking around with drunk guy before, I don't know what he's supposed to be. Is he supposed to be like a dep? I don't even know what he is.
Well, he
But
kind of deputizes
yeah,
himself.
he goes to pick up Miguel, and poor Miguel's like there with his wife, and he's just like, yeah, sure, I'll go with you. He's like, there's no reason for this scene even. Like you could have just brought him in, but
Well, I think what's being done between the lines here is Miguel can see that these guys actually, if he refuses,
hurt him. Yeah,
they
I
will
know.
hurt him and his family is there. And so he's like, look, I know that you were sent by Luis. I trust Luis, and so yeah, I'll come with you, no problem. Like a lot of other people might have said, hell no, you're not the cops. I'm not going to go with you, and that they would have been within their rights. But because this is already not a legal thing that's happening, I don't know. I think he probably
But
does the only thing he
then the
could.
other but then the other people working in this community kind of show up and they're all carrying literally rakes and like
Well,
shovels
they're
and stuff
gardeners, I guess.
like they're
Yeah.
gardeners and this is like but how would that be I don't know. This was just weird.
Well, those are their. I think those are like their mob tools, and these are like Miguel's
But
friends and family.
These are Miguel's friends. But
Yeah.
and then in the meantime Charlie goes, to try to confront Hammond again. Um
Yeah.
it doesn't go as well. Hammond also has a handgun because everybody has guns here.
And it's because it's the daytime.
Right.
Uh, so he pulls a gun on Charlie and then like walks him to his car and he's like, "You're gonna go to jail now."
Right. And
Because
Charlie
and he doesn't know that Charlie's the werewolf. He doesn't know that Charlie's a murder suspect. All he knows is that Charlie threatened him with
right,
physical harm
but
just
Charlie's
now.
also like, okay, I'll go. Like, I mean, granted, he's got the gun and everything, but I mean, like, I'm not sure what Charlie's end game was there with Hammond. Like, was it to do
Yeah.
turn with him? I don't know, but
I think yeah, basically in this third act of the film, Charlie, I think, has realized that is realizing what he has in the wolf transformation, is realizing that anybody who's near him when he transforms is in physical danger. And so I think on some level, he's just trying to get close to Hammond and stay close to Hammond. And certainly that's how he finishes that relationship as the scene keeps going. But during the day, we've also had scenes of Luis watching the video, I think that they recovered from Earl's house. And Sharon has gotten a bunch of voice memos that Charlie had like set up to send when when him and Earl finished their little thing. And so she's been like we have a couple of shots of her figuring everything out and listening to what he's explaining to her. And we also have the video, such as it is, at least the audio, because the camera I think is pointing at the floor from as soon as he starts to transform from Earl's house. That Luis now has this sense of, oh yeah, there's a werewolf and it's Charlie and it's not Miguel, but again, he's
right.
not very good at getting that across to the frightened
Nope,
mob.
he is not. And
So
then
yeah, so Hammond basically marches Charlie into the police station past the cops, who and Miguel is also being brought in just after that. I mean,
right.
honestly, good for Miguel that they didn't just march him to a tree and hang him because you kind of get the sense that that might have been their next step too, because they are increasingly not listening to Luis, because Luis is also has a Spanish name, and they're casting aspersions about his objectivity and maybe his competence, definitely about his competence, because Hammond has been cajoling him to arrest Miguel the whole movie, and he's been saying there's no evidence, and they're like, that we're not interested in that. We just want we
Right.
just want
But it takes them walking into the jail and actually seeing Charlie. And this is a pretty, I don't want to say it's a funny scene, but like
Oh, it's funny. I
it
mean,
is
it's
pretty
fun because it's like just desserts. It's yeah, you want Hammond. He handcuffs himself to Hammond and then throws the key away, and he locks them both in the cell. And then almost like very quickly starts to transform. And this is a great sort of scene for you want this to go. It doesn't actually go the way you think because Hammond's buddy, the guy who's like the mob leader, grabs Luis's gun, I think,
Yep. And
and
then
shoots Hammond because he's
accidentally, but
grossly incompetent.
yep.
And
Which, by the way, is more likely what happens when anybody, you know,
yeah, I mean, yeah,
when they
not everybody's a marksman for sure. And then this is the scene where Holly is like, "Oh, this is a horror movie," is when Charlie chews off Hammond's hand, and it's just kind
and
of
then
like hanging.
he's like tearing the skin. It's like it's a
Yeah,
very horror little film like thing. And what I do love about this is like he's doing this with such relish, and then the door of the jail is open. I will say, Luis, slowly, like somebody just close that door.
yeah.
Like would have been a better move. Um, but I love that the only reason why they actually clear Miguel is because everybody's confronted with this,
Yeah,
and they realize that the Wolfman is real. And poor Miguel, it's like, of course he was exonerated, but that's what it took. Like they wouldn't have
but
believed this
yeah,
otherwise.
I mean, like, there's no exoneration scene. He just walks out after the
Yeah,
werewolf basically walks out of the police station past all these people
right.
and walks out into the parking lot. There is Sharon with one of Earl's many other guns. We've had a shot of her going to Earl's house and finding his drawer full of guns and the bullets.
Bullets. Yeah.
And she goes, Charlie. And the werewolf looks at her and she goes, "This is what you want, right?" Or something along those lines. And
Yeah.
then
And
shoots
she
him
shoots him,
twice.
but he's still doing all right. He's still moving. He's still wolfing.
He gets shot those two times and then just kind of walks away.
It,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's enough time for him to show his abs once again. So that's pretty good.
As
Like
long as we get to see those, that's
he
all that
gets another
matters.
ab scene, and and all's right with the world. He just goes off into the woods and
He runs
flat.
off into the woods, and then we have that scene with Miguel coming out of the jail. His wife is there, all of his buddies are there with their shovels, and they all kind of celebrate and cheer. I'm like, where two bullets were just fired out of a gun seconds before
Right.
by Sharon.
And she's
What
still holding the gun. Nobody seems to be worried about that. And then,
what are
you
you doing celebrating in this parking lot, Miguel? And why do you feel like this is over for you? I don't think that this community has like decided that they're cool
Also,
with Mexicans
wife
again.
wife is there. I think he'd be getting he'd be getting people into the cars as quickly as possible because
I'd
that's
be
a lot
bent
better.
over, running serpentine, like, get in the car, get out of here, we gotta go.
Right.
There's nothing to be celebrating in this scene. And so I think this is like way too, this is an attempt by, Fessenden to make this like into a victory for the working man, for immigrant workforce. And I'm like, no, nothing here there's been like no real, other than the white guy shooting the other white guy. And I don't know if he'll be charged for that. Also, yeah, he definitely should be. He took a cop's gun and shot a man.
Right.
But
Then
we'll
you
have
have this
to,
weird little moment where the pastor comes out and sees Sharon. He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry." Like now she's gonna find out her dad's dead, and she also just shot
that
Charlie. Like she's having a rough day,
is
and
a rough day.
and Stuart died. Like
God
all
damn
you know.
Stuart.
Um,
Yeah.
in
In the
there.
woods, we see the wolf turning slowly back into Charlie, which is, I think, our cue that he's dead or dying. He generally doesn't turn into a human until the sun is up, and it's definitely still dark out.
Right, and he
Uh,
flashes back to because he hadn't been able to remember how he turned to werewolf up until this point, and it flashes back. So we see the whole thing where he's coming out of his studio and he gets attacked by, I think, a female werewolf, it seems.
well, I
Um,
don't know, because that guy in the very last scene of the film, maybe it was a post-credit scene where he's walking down the street and he walks past a giant, scary-looking dude.
yeah,
You remember
but
that?
it wasn't. It wasn't this werewolf looked very different than him.
Yeah, it was like black and very much more wolfy.
Yeah.
Yellow eyes. It kind of does look feminine, but
That
I
I thought it was gonna turn out to be honestly, I thought it was gonna turn out to be the lawyer woman. Like I thought it was gonna, like circle back to that. And that's why she was all up on him. That's how I thought they were gonna close it out,
that could have been interesting. Yeah,
apparently not. But yeah. Um so so anyway, he's done and dusted. Um
and to the town of Talbot Falls will never be the same. I
right,
imagine the Hilltop project will not get completed.
right. And
The legal proof or whatever that Kate has been digging up is meaningless, or maybe not. Maybe that's what they'll do to really kill off the project so the investors can't continue it. But Miguel and his guys still fired. Uh, Still no work for them. Community probably still jerks. Luis still down a deputy.
yep.
There's I don't know. I don't know what my takeaways are in terms of like I don't need the story to be completely neatly wrapped up, but other than Charlie's story is neatly wrapped up, and he's murdered many people, four at least in this film. Bob also is killed, but off screen, and I'm not sure that Charlie actually kills Bob. The death of Bob is one of the reasons why they go after Miguel because Bob turns up dead. And he didn't come home last night, and all those. Remember those scenes?
Yeah.
But you never see Charlie kill Bob.
We just see what we think is Charlie looking at them, but we never see that. That's true.
Well, yeah,
Maybe,
I mean, he's definitely there at some point, and he's definitely looking at them. But then you cut from that parking lot to him running through the woods, and then like several scenes later, you see a shot of Bob's bloody corpse in the tree in the woods. But
right.
how he died, I don't know. Maybe. I
Yeah.
mean, it's well, more than likely it's Charlie, but he's
Yeah.
definitely killed like six people in
Yeah.
this film. But yeah, that's the story. What are your like so having gone through the plot again, how do you feel about it?
I mean, I liked some of this. I liked some of the ideas of this. I felt like the story could have been tighter and the subplots were kind of weak. Um, as I was watching it, I just felt like there were so many like little weird ways with editing the story that could have made this a lot more successful. So personally, I like my plot twist where the lawyer lady turns out to be the one who initially infected him.
Yeah, that seems
Um,
interesting.
but the other part is, I do think that this would have been a lot more successful if it wasn't so obvious that Charlie actually was the wolf. Like if they had played it like almost like you don't see the real monster until the end, or
Yeah,
confirm that he's actually the wolf until the end. And I think that would have been a lot more interesting. And it was, to me, that editing could have cut the time down. I thought it was too long by probably about 15 minutes or so. Maybe even like 20 minutes. I know that would have cut it a little bit more short, but I just think some of this could have been tighter and, you know, there would have been more interesting things, especially, with the Miguel frame job. If you had been, say, trying to give him an alibi, like to me, it would have been a lot more interesting if Charlie had been like basically trying to give him an alibi, like getting Miguel locked up so and doing the thing and it wouldn't possibly be Miguel. Like there could have been like a few different ways to play this storytelling that to me would have made it a lot more interesting. But kind of some fun scenes. I think I liked, the context pieces, and it was beautiful scenery and sort of a fun, like some of the shots and things were kind of fun. But there were too many plot holes for me, and I don't know that I would. Maybe if you're really like, there's definitely like that old school horror vibe to it, which I kind of liked, but it wasn't my favorite in terms of werewolf films. How about you?
I I don't think I've seen enough werewolf films to make that sort of statement now. I mean, I've and maybe that's something we should fix,
Okay.
AJ. But I enjoyed this movie overall. It was fun to watch. It was a lot of Alex Hurt riding around in cars and then leaning back in through the
Yeah.
window of cars as he got out of cars to like pass to say something and to yeah. It felt kind of repetitive in the way that they chose to do his journey. Um, but I liked the second and third acts, I think. If you can get rid of the Miguel stuff, only because I like that's an important story to tell. I just think that they didn't do it right.
Yeah.
I was kind of interested to see how they were going to do it, but it's just such a it's a very sensitive sort of thing to try to do as a white writer, director, producer with a white main actor talking
Yep.
about how like look at these poor Mexican immigrants and how badly they're treated and how are we going to help them or whatever.
To
Like,
me, to me, those themes were a little bit ham-fisted, and
yeah,
even the stuff with Earl was ham-fisted. But I
yeah,
like
it was like lip service, but not enough.
right.
Yeah, like
Uh,
showing a black man getting shot by a cop
yeah.
in like
After he just said that that's what was going to happen, was a little on the nose, I guess. I just,
yeah.
but this was. I have no idea what the budget was for this, but it felt like a little bit of a passion project.
I think that's kind of what this guy does.
Yeah.
That's what this guy does. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know any of that those details either, but if you're interested in hearing the interview with Larry Fessenden, he did it on one of the Bloody Disgusting podcasts. This one's called The Boo Crew. And so he was interviewed by them a couple of episodes ago. So you don't have to go back too far to find it. And it's worth a listen because he talks about his vision and his approach to making movies, his influences, and I enjoyed listening to that. Um, in the meantime, if you've seen Blackout and you have thoughts, let us know what they are. You can email us at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. You can find all of our episodes online at reanimated.podbean.com. And we hope you come back for more reanimating. And so thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Bye bye.